My entire family is forcing me to marry my sister's fiancé, the crippled illegitimate son of the Nelson Group. Later, Nelson started his own company and became the wealthiest man around. My sister immediately regretted it. I'm your fiancé. You're supposed to marry me. In the previous life, Nelson did marry her, and he died a tragic death. But now, both he and I are reborn. Sitting at the vanity, I let the makeup artist work on my face. Today, I was called up early to get dressed, and made up for no other reason than it being my wedding day with Nelson. The door creaked open, and Sophia strutted in, her high heels clicking on the floor. She looked down her nose and eyed me. Lily, you're finally marrying Nelson. Are you happy? I just glanced up coldly at her. Oh, I'm very happy, as long as you won't regret it later. Hearing this, Sophia laughed heartily, clutching her stomach. Regret? Lily, are you dreaming? Why would I regret getting rid of that cripple? Without that burden, my life can only get better. A month ago, Nelson was still Sophia's fiancé. The Martin family and the Roberts family had arranged marriages since childhood, with the eldest son and daughter destined to wed. But a year ago, the Roberts family acknowledged an illegitimate son who had been suffering outside for many years. Skinny and with a lame leg, yet he was still the eldest son. For the sake of our family honor, Sophia had to marry him. Upon hearing this, Sophia cried and threw tantrums for days, making my parents, who adored her, very troubled. They couldn't bear to see her step into such a miserable marriage. Thus, they turned their attention to me, bringing me back from the countryside to marry Nelson in her stead. In the previous life, Nelson married Sophia, but just as his career was booming, he was backstabbed by his delicate wife. She leaked confidential information to his half-brother, leading to his downfall and tragic death. But in this life, for some reason, Sophia persuaded the Roberts family to let me marry Nelson instead. I smirked at Sophia, raising my eyebrows. Don't be happy too soon, sis. The end isn't set in stone yet. After saying that, I turned and left the dressing room. The ending wasn't set because I had been reborn. As the Roberts family's servants pushed Nelson in his wheelchair into the hall, the guests sighed. I glanced at the man through the crowd. His face was paler and thinner than a year ago, but still frail-looking. Only I knew this man would later become the most powerful figure in City A. At the wedding in the previous life, Sophia cried incessantly. But this time, I calmly completed my vows. Nelson and I, amidst the crowd's curious and mocking gazes, finished the somewhat mismatched wedding. I became Mrs. Nelson. After marriage, Nelson obviously couldn't continue living in the Roberts family mansion. We moved into our new house together. Back home, Nelson slowly stood up from his wheelchair, limping towards me. I stepped forward to help him, but was pushed away. Cold indifference filled his eyes. I don't need your pity. I froze for a moment, then understood. Nelson had suffered hardship from a young age, and even after returning to the Roberts family, he endured endless mockery from his brother, David, and Mrs. Roberts. Under such circumstances, he naturally grew sensitive and fragile. Ignoring his resistance, I helped him to the sofa. Since we are married, we are one family now. There's no need to reject my help. Surprised by my words, a certain warmth flickered in his eyes, making them softer. Satisfied, I smiled. Anyone who suffered so much would be deeply touched by their first taste of kindness. Since I decided to be a good Mrs. Nelson and use his power to take down the family that used me, the Martin family, I had to win Nelson over. The next day, Nelson and I visited the Roberts family mansion to see his parents. The Roberts were even more prestigious than the Martins. If it weren't for the arranged marriage from years ago, the Martin family wouldn't have been able to reach their level. Mr. Roberts greeted us warmly, inviting us to sit and chat. He felt he owed Nelson and always wanted to make up for it. In the previous life, during Nelson's struggle with David, Mr. Roberts supported Nelson. Unfortunately, David's maternal family was powerful, and they held key information, allowing David to narrowly win and utterly destroy Nelson. Mrs. Roberts, however, was clearly displeased with our visit. Covering her nose, she coughed dramatically. If the sick person stayed home and recuperated, it wouldn't matter, but spreading your germs and bad luck to others is unacceptable. My David can't handle that kind of crap. David glanced provocatively at Nelson. Nelson turned pale, but he didn't say anything. He was used to this kind of mockery and insult. Mr. Roberts furrowed his brow and glanced at Mrs. Roberts, but said nothing. Bringing an illegitimate child home and acknowledging him was already a stretch, so he could only privately encourage Nelson to endure their mother and son's sarcasm. I openly gave Nelson a piece of meat and smiled, chiming in, "Yes, honey, you should eat more to recover. We still need to have babies in the future." My boldness left everyone at the table stunned, not expecting me to so quickly embrace my role as Mrs. Roberts. Nelson was momentarily taken aback, but then understood I was helping him out. He smiled back at me and gave me some food in return. Mrs. Roberts couldn't stand our lovey-dovey show any longer, putting down her chopsticks and declaring that she felt unwell and needed David to help her back to her room. The family dinner ended on a sour note. Sitting back in the car, Nelson gently held my hand and hesitantly asked, "Lily, don't you feel wrong marrying someone like me, a cripple?" I squeezed his hand tightly and affirmed, "How could I? It's just a physical flaw. While some people with huge inner deficiencies can still enjoy wealth and luxury, why shouldn't you deserve the same?" I thought of my tragic past life, my eyes darkening. I vowed to help Nelson change his fate this time, to support his career, and to make those who looked down on us regret it, ensuring those who harmed us paid the price. Peace didn't last long before Sophia came looking for me. When the receptionist called to tell me Sophia was here, I instinctively frowned. It was like a weasel paying a New Year visit to a hen. She obviously had no good intentions. But I couldn't refuse, so I let the receptionist show her in, prepared to deal with whatever came my way. Sophia still carried herself with arrogance. She casually tossed her designer bag onto my desk, scattering my design drafts all over the floor. I frowned and asked, "Miss Sophia, what brings you here today?" I had been reborn a year ago, just when Nelson returned to the Roberts family and the Martin family brought me back from the countryside to cover for Sophia. In my previous life, I obediently stayed home, neither competing for inheritance nor the company, just wanting to live peacefully. But Sophia still wouldn't let me be. She hated that I could fall in love freely while she was stuck in an arranged marriage to a cripple. She resented that I could inherit all of Grandma's savings and live comfortably, so she schemed to ruin my reputation, leaving me despised and humiliated, until I tragically took my own life, just to see me as miserable as she was. Given my rebirth, I wouldn't repeat the same mistakes and wait at home for others to harm me, so I opened a studio to set more plans in motion for myself. "Lily, you know Nelson isn't in great health. A cripple and an illegitimate son. You should know who will hold power in the Roberts family eventually, right?" Sophia, surprisingly cordial, spoke to me gently. I furrowed my brow tighter and asked directly, "What do you mean, Sophia? My work is plenty. My time is valuable. If you can't get to the point, please leave." Though I had my suspicions, she dropped the pretense, revealing, "David wants to work with you. You know, despite being the second son, he's got strong support from his mother's side. It's almost certain he'll come out ahead in the future battle for control of N Group." "Oh!" I raised an eyebrow, leaned back, and asked, "Why would David want to work with me then?" Despite lacking maternal support, it's clear Mr. Roberts dotes on Nelson. Sophia, irritated, said no matter how much Mr. Roberts dotes on him, he wouldn't hand everything to a bastard. And look at him. All skin and bones, he won't live long. Anyway, I'm pitying you, thinking of you as my sister, not wanting you to end up a lonely widow, giving you this opportunity. Like anyone would believe Sophia actually cared about me. "So, what do you want?" I finally asked. Relieved, Sophia regained her smugness. "You don't have to do much. Just keep an eye on Nelson and report any company secrets. When necessary, help David tamper with or steal documents." I couldn't help but laugh. "Do you realize what you're suggesting is illegal, and you're brazenly saying it here?" Sophia froze, realizing she was tricked. Before she could speak, I interrupted. "Forget it. Nelson and I have a loving marriage. There's no chance for you to exploit. I'll also inform Nelson about your plans. Thanks for the warning." Enraged, Sophia shouted, her face turning red, "Lily, don't be disrespectful. You'll regret this." "We'll see who regrets it." I looked her straight in the eyes, unafraid. "Call security to escort Miss Sophia out," I coldly ordered through the intercom. Fuming, Sophia stomped out of my office. Watching her walk away, my muscles relaxed. Memories of the past life's torments she inflicted on me were still fresh. Even now, seeing her made my body tense up. In my past life, I willingly joined forces with David, but in this life, even though I didn't marry Nelson, Sophia still came to try and persuade me to be their informant. It's understandable, though. Growing up, everyone told Sophia that her future husband would be David, the young master of the Roberts family. She's had a crush on him since she was young, and despite his constant affairs, she's deeply in love with him. In my previous life, she risked jail time to help David seize the family assets. But I'm not like Sophia. I'm not so easily manipulated. The most important thing is, David has often helped Sophia commit her wrongdoings. They are all on the same boat, and they are my enemies, the people I seek revenge on. When I got home, I hesitated for a moment, but decided to tell. Sophia came to the office today. Nelson seemed surprised that I would tell him this. She said David wants to collaborate with me, but I refused him. I told Nelson everything honestly. But you still need to be careful of the people around you, especially those who have access to confidential files in the company. In my past life, Sophia could steal confidential documents from the company so easily because there had to be accomplices inside the company. After hearing what I said, Nelson's face turned serious. He seemed surprised that I refused David and asked, "Why did you refuse him?" His offer must have been very tempting. I was stunned that he would ask this question. I thought for a moment, anger welling up inside me. I said to Nelson, "Because I love you. I'm your wife. Since we're in this together, I won't abandon you. Why don't you trust me, or do you not believe someone can love you unconditionally?" I looked at Nelson's pale, sickly face and felt a sudden sadness. This insecure man finally opened his heart to his wife in our past life, only to be betrayed by the one he loved most. Nelson stared at me for a very long time, his lips trembling, then suddenly pulled me into a tight hug, as if trying to merge us into one. "Lily, please don't betray me. You're all I have left." During the new year, Nelson and I had to go back to the Roberts family mansion for dinner. I squeezed Nelson's hand to comfort him. He looked up and gave me a small smile. Over the past few months, our relationship had slowly warmed up, and he finally began to open up to me. Mrs. Roberts and David still treated us with disdain, just like they did 6 months ago. David's eyes showed even more hostility, likely because he hadn't expected me to refuse his offer. But he hadn't given up. When I came out of the restroom, a shadow grabbed me forcefully and dragged me back inside. I struggled in the darkness, dim light from outside revealing it was David. In the darkness, with the man's heavy breathing and my restrained body, I couldn't help but recall the cold night in my past life when I was framed by Sophia and raped by a criminal. Luckily, it was winter, and I was dressed warmly. David pinned me against the sink, holding me tight, breathing into my ear, "Lily, I'll give you another chance. Join me. It's much better than staying with that cripple." His voice was close, and he cruelly touched my ear, making me shiver. "No, I won't." I mustered all my strength to refuse, tears welling up uncontrollably. "Oh, why? Don't tell me you've really fallen for that cripple. Can he satisfy you? If you come with me, I won't treat you badly, and now you have no other choice." He started trying to remove my clothes, and I couldn't help but scream. But David covered my mouth tightly. My strength was fading, and just when I was about to lose hope, the bathroom door was forcefully opened. I saw Nelson stumble in. Seeing someone enter, David relaxed his grip. I pushed him away and ran into Nelson's arms, finally breaking into tears from the fear and grievance. Nelson hugged me tightly, gently patting my back to comfort me. David raised his eyebrows at the scene, loosened his tie, and then behind Nelson came the frantic footsteps of Mr. and Mrs. Roberts. But David didn't panic. He casually waited for them to enter and see the scene. Mr. Roberts was so furious that his cane almost wobbled out of his hand. He pointed at David and was about to speak, but David was faster. "Dad, she seduced me. She waited for me outside the restroom, and when she saw me, she jumped on me and pulled me inside. She said she preferred me, that my brother couldn't satisfy her, and that he wasn't as good as me." He deliberately dragged out his words, provocatively looking at Nelson. I looked up at Nelson, whose already pale face turned even whiter. I desperately wanted to explain to him. "I didn't. It wasn't me. I know. I believe you." Nelson pressed my head back into his chest, protecting me tightly. The truth was obvious to everyone, but no one could say it out loud. That's the reality of a powerful family. Mr. Roberts slammed his cane on the wooden floor, the sound echoing through the silent Roberts mansion. You. Mr. Roberts was so angry he could barely speak. Although his health had been declining over the years, he hadn't expected his own son to commit such utterly disgraceful and unethical actions right under his nose. Mrs. Roberts cut him off, saying, "David has always been well-behaved since he was a child. With so many wealthy young women chasing after him, how could he possibly be interested in a married woman? It must be this vixen seducing David." She pointed at me. "Yes, Mom, you know me well." David followed her lead, looking pitiful as he reached for her hand. "My boy, you've been wronged." Mrs. Roberts patted David's hand, acting as if she was about to cry. Seeing this, Nelson's eyes darkened even more. "Besides, I can't be sure that if we continue to stay under the same roof, my sister-in-law won't do something outrageous to me," he said, glaring at Nelson with a challenging look in his eyes. "A bastard and a vixen who seduces her brother-in-law. How can you still show your faces in the Roberts family? You've inherited every bit of that disgraceful mother of yours." Mrs. Roberts picked up the taunt, shouting loudly enough. Mr. Roberts banged his cane, his body shaking as if he was about to faint from anger. Nelson let go of me and turned to support Mr. Roberts. When he turned back, his gaze was icy as he regarded David and his mother. "I will leave the Roberts family and start my own business. I won't fight you for the N Group," Nelson said coldly, leaving everyone stunned. David and his mother never expected Nelson to leave the Roberts family so willingly. I was also frozen in place. In my past life, Nelson left the Roberts family and started his own business, but it was 3 years later. What had happened to change everyone's actions so swiftly? Could my rebirth have triggered a butterfly effect? But I hadn't done anything at all. After leaving the mansion, my relationship with Nelson deepened. In critical moments, I could see his concern for me. He noticed both David and I were missing from the banquet, and feeling something was wrong, rushed to rescue me without even bothering to grab his cane or wheelchair. Once Nelson left the Roberts family and started his own business, I could easily see he felt more relaxed, possibly because he no longer had to endure the constant jabs and pressure from David and his mother. With Mr. Roberts' help, Nelson's company was successfully established and began to operate smoothly. In less than 2 years, Nelson had made a name for himself in City A. People said he had a shadow of Mr. Roberts in his heyday. At the beginning of the year, there was an auction, and Nelson took me to attend it. I was browsed through the auction catalog when I felt a sense of familiarity. Today's first item for auction was a piece of land at the suburban sewage treatment plant, presented as the opening item. The suburban sewage treatment plant. I suddenly looked up, remembering in my previous life, not long after the auction, the government designated this area as the site for a new metro station. It was not only a crucial part of the metro line, but also a connecting point between City A and City B. The government ended up buying the land for several times the auction price. I was about to turn to tell Nelson to bid for the land when he had already raised his paddle. 1 million. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone knew the suburban sewage treatment plant had been abandoned for years, and the land was polluted. It was useless for agriculture, forestry, animal husbandry, or fishing, and being in the suburbs meant no one would go there. Naturally, no one was going to outbid him for this piece of wasteland. David, sitting in the front row, also turned to watch the spectacle. Our eyes met, his filled with mockery. Nelson didn't make another bid for the rest of the auction. When the event was over and people were leaving, David blocked our way. He looked down at us and sneered, "You waste the old man's money on worthless land." The old man must be truly blind to think you could be a successor. His tone was laced with jealousy. Nelson ignored him, not even sparing him a glance, and took my hand as we left through another door, leaving David seething and pounding the seat behind us. When the abandoned sewage treatment plant was eventually bought by the government for $5 million, David was furious. But how did Nelson know this land would become so valuable? A strange feeling suddenly stirred in me. From agreeing to change the marriage arrangement to bidding on the sewage treatment plant, the real changes in the story's direction didn't come from me. All of the butterfly effects originated from Nelson. A terrifying suspicion crossed my mind. Could Nelson have also been reborn? If I could be reborn, so could he. After all, we both met tragic ends in our past life. After this thought took root, I kept testing Nelson, but Nelson was meticulous in everything he did, never leaving me any openings to test him. After the sewage treatment plant incident, which not only netted us a profit of $4 million, but also gained Nelson admiration from other companies and some veterans, more shareholders within the N Group began to want him to take over the company. In such a situation, Sophia and David grew increasingly restless. One day, as I brought Nelson lunch, I happened to catch Sophia coming to see him at the office. Nelson and I exchanged glances. I was suddenly curious about what Sophia wanted with him, so I hid behind the door, sitting on the sofa and snacking while waiting for her to come up. The door creaked open. I couldn't see their figures or expressions, but I could hear everything clearly. Nelson. Sophia's voice was so sweet it gave me goosebumps. After some hurried footsteps, Nelson's cold voice sounded, "Miss Sophia, stop. It's inappropriate for a man and woman to be so close, especially when I'm married to your sister, no less. Such intimate behavior is improper." "Nelson, you know it should have been me marrying you," Sophia hurriedly said. "We missed our chance 3 years ago, but if I'm willing now, do you still want me?" As she spoke, she tried to lean against Nelson, forcing him to take a few steps back. It was honestly unexpected, yet somehow logical, that Sophia would extend an olive branch to Nelson in this lifetime. Sophia didn't marry Nelson, but David also didn't want to marry her. After all, he had his pick of women, and she was just the plainest one among them. Besides, now that she had no use to him, it was obvious he'd discard her like she was nothing. I even doubted if David had an affair with Sophia in the past just because of the sister-in-law title. So Sophia was in a panic. David didn't want to marry her. She needed to find someone else quickly. It's been 3 years. She's older now, and even though David never publicly acknowledged her, everyone in the elite circle knew about their affair. Who would want a used-up woman? What surprised me was that she'd actually go after the crippled guy she once looked down upon. Maybe I was cracking the seeds a bit too loudly. Sophia suddenly yelled in my direction, "Who's there?" I walked out from behind the door, innocently spreading my hands to show the seeds. "You. What were you eavesdropping on? What did you hear?" Sophia snapped, flustered and furious. "Oh, I was just sitting there listening," I said, nonchalantly seating myself in Nelson's office chair, looking every bit the queen. "I heard you want to be Nelson's concubine, is that right? Or mistress, concubine. Don't insult me, Lily." Sophia, enraged, tried to hit me, but Nelson pushed her back steadily. "Oh, did I get it wrong? You just want to share a husband with a sister, right? That's a concubine in ancient times," I said. "But Nelson can't decide that. I make the decisions in our house," I continued while lounging in the chair. Nelson smiled indulgently at me and didn't argue. "You should ask me. After all, in ancient times, the main wife oversaw taking concubines." I looked at her challengingly. Sophia, knowing she had no standing, stormed out of Nelson's office, slamming the door in frustration. "Did I say something wrong, honey?" I asked Nelson, batting my eyelashes. Nelson patted my head tenderly and said, "Whatever my wife says is right." Then he added, "But your husband here won't take any concubines." Meanwhile, David was even more desperate than Sophia. Over the past 2 years, Mr. Roberts's health had deteriorated, and most company affairs were managed by David. But like in the past, he could barely maintain the status quo and was even showing signs of decline. Under such circumstances, shareholders demanded Nelson return and take over, replacing David. Although Nelson left the Roberts family to start his own business after being recognized, he still had equal inheritance rights as David. Legally, he was still qualified to compete for the company, so David panicked. Nelson and I were woken up by an urgent phone call from David. We exchanged worried glances. As expected, David's anxious voice came through the receiver, stark against the quiet night. "Dad's not going to make it. He wants to see you one last time. Come home quickly." We hurriedly got dressed and drove to the Roberts family estate. Mr. Roberts had a few more years in the previous life, but due to a series of butterfly effects, almost everything had been accelerated in this world. His critical condition was anticipated. The Roberts family estate was brightly lit and bustling with people, the entire atmosphere tense. Nelson held my hand tightly as we walked in. I could feel his palms sweating. Mr. Roberts wasn't a good father or husband, but we saw his guilt and efforts to make amends towards Nelson over the years. Despite any resentment Nelson might have felt, facing his father's end brought complicated feelings. We were stopped at the door and waited for a long time before David came out. He let Nelson in but blocked me. "This is a family matter, Miss Lily. You shouldn't hear Mr. Roberts's final words." I pressed my lips together, saying nothing, and anxiously waited outside. As time passed without movement, Nelson still didn't come out. I grew worried, fearing something had happened to him, but couldn't rush in to check. "Worried about your husband, sis?" David's now calm voice came from behind me. The urgency from earlier was gone. I glared at him, ignoring his taunt. He wasn't annoyed, just smiled. "And 3 years ago, you turned me down here. I wonder if you'll regret it after tonight. A chill ran down my spine, sensing something was amiss. Just then, a familiar figure whispered something to David. The man wore a bent baseball cap that obscured his face, but his build and profile seemed familiar. At that moment, a few police officers suddenly barged in, showed their badges, and said, "We're from the police department. We received a tip that Mr. Nelson is involved in tax evasion and money laundering. There's substantial evidence. Mr. Nelson needs to come with us for investigation." I was stunned, instinctively looking at David. He shrugged, but the triumph was clear in his eyes. "Officer, someone's framing him. He's law-abiding. He'd never do such things." I pleaded, but it was in vain. No one listened to my desperate explanation. I was extremely anxious, but I could only watch helplessly as the police broke in and took Nelson away. Mr. Roberts was also shocked by the scene. His breathing became more rapid, and he passed away completely in the middle of the night. This farcical night finally came to an end at dawn. Everyone left the Roberts family, and the news of Nelson being arrested quickly spread throughout City A. Many opportunists quickly turned to David, and Nelson's company's stock prices plummeted. It was only then that I suddenly remembered who that familiar figure belonged to, Mark, a core member of Nelson's team. He had been with him since the company was founded. I had seen him at the company a few times, and he always warmly called me sister-in-law. I never doubted him, but he was at the Roberts family last night. I could almost immediately confirm he was David's man. The evidence provided by the police was also from him. I staggered back home, feeling lost, and suddenly noticed something unusual at the entrance. Nelson and I both have OCD, and the house is always meticulously organized in our fixed order. But today, the placement of the slippers at the entrance had changed. This wasn't like that when we left last night. Sensing something, I rushed to Nelson's study. All the confidential documents related to his work were gone. There's no way this was just a simple burglary, especially at such a specific time last night. I quickly called the police and also asked the property management to check last night's surveillance footage. The investigation result came out quickly. Sophia was caught in the interrogation room. I harshly questioned Sophia on how she dared to use such a low-level theft method. She was bound to be caught in no time. So what? Sophia's face was full of indifference. "I just need to serve a few years in prison. When I get out, he promised he'd marry me." Of course, I knew who she was talking about, David. I thought Sophia had gone mad. She would do anything to help David complete his plan for a sliver of hope. But she was right. Such a low-level and simple operation could indeed deal us irreparable damage. David got hold of Nelson's company's secrets once again. But just when I was almost in despair, Nelson was released, acquitted, and at the same time, news came out that David was arrested and imprisoned. He had colluded with Mark and Sophia to steal others' company secrets and was also suspected of forging evidence to frame others. These charges were enough to keep him behind bars for several years. When I arrived outside the police station, it was already dark. Nelson was standing alone under the streetlight, still wearing the coat he hurriedly put on that night a few days ago. His figure looked especially desolate. My eyes reddened almost immediately, and I ran into his arms. Nelson held me tightly. "Don't worry, do you know who your husband is?" How could I be so easily taken down? He gently reassured me. He told me he had long known that Mark was David's man, so he purposely kept him close. "If you eliminate one Mark, there will be a second James, John. It's better to keep him under my watch. This way I can control his every move." I choked up and blamed him. "Next time, don't keep it from me. I worried about you for so long." He hugged me tighter. I was surprised to find that he was standing firmly, holding me, without any of his usual signs of instability. Under my interrogation, he finally confessed. I wanted to keep a low profile before to avoid David's traps. "Oh, so no need to keep low now?" I asked, slightly aggrieved. "No need. David's not coming out." In my astonished gaze, Nelson pressed my head into his chest. The late autumn wind was chilly, but his embrace was warm. He killed the old man. I was momentarily stunned, then snuggled deeper into his chest. I no longer cared if he had been reborn. Regardless, from now on, he and I were going to embrace a truly exciting life that belonged to us.